Shall we do it? Shall we go there? You know,
Let's go
yeah,
there.
yeah. Who's going to call action? I'd really like Jessica. I'd really love. I'm totally not an actor. I'd really love you to call action on this. Would that be all right? Just to hear your intonation of action.
I don't call action.
Great. Good answer. Hey, welcome everyone to the late night for us talk with Jessica Hobbs, who's joining us from London. I think from London. Is that right?
Early morning London. Yep.
Yeah, great. And thank you for joining us, Jessica. There's been huge interest in this because well, we're all proud and we're thrilled, and we've all watched The Crown, and a lot of us have watched a lot of your other work, in particular for me, The Slap and other things, and I feel like we've just got about sort of 200 kind of sponges down here in New Zealand, sort of all kind of really squeezed, ready to suck in. So we're just going to go straight into it. Jessica and I did speak last night, and you said to me, I have a bit of a rule: lean into what scares you the most.
Yes, I do have that rule. So if I read something and I think, if I'm incredibly grabbed by it, but I think that's impossible, I have no idea how to transcend that notion to an audience, that's the kind of thing I want to go towards. Occasionally it can be something. Years ago I did a piece where we had to break the fourth wall, where characters literally turned and talked to camera, and I remember thinking, oh no. And then I thought, well, just try it. It was, so I sometimes think it's great to go towards those things where your shoulders go up and you think it's impossible. And I like to be scared when I'm working. It took me a long time to work that out, but I actually like to be uncertain. I like to not know whether I can achieve what we're setting out to achieve. That may sound really insane, but that is very much a kind of driver in the way that I work.
When did that shift for you? Because I presume, like most of us, when you started off, you probably liked the opposite, because it's all terrifying when you're just starting off.
It is all terrifying. I know.
It's still terrifying.
It's still terrifying. Yes, it's. I don't know. I think it's constantly like that in the industry that we work in, because every job's new. So every few months you're working with a new set of people and a new set of circumstances in a new world, a new setting, and a new time frame. So we have that naturally. But I think I'd been working in Australia for a few years on a show called Heartbreak High, and it was wonderful. It was like a film school for me. And when I came out of that, I struggled a bit to be, look, it was not in the era we're in now. As a female director, you weren't seen as a great calling card. So I was kind of getting a lot of conversations around, well, this has got action in it and we're just not sure whether you can do that. And so I found myself getting very frustrated by the kind of meetings I was having. And I got an opportunity to go to New York, and I went there, and I had 3 years working for a documentary company, and it just kind of shifted my perspective in many ways. Not least because you have to be really ballsy in New York. And so I think when I came back to Australia, I then became much more able to, even if I was frightened, to go, that's the person I want to work with, that's the job I want to do. And that's also where I became much more active about particularly seeking out writers who I wanted to work with. So that's something I've done across my career. If I see something, I'll often approach the writer and go and tell them why I loved it, what moved me about it. Please keep me in mind if you've got other stuff going on, because my work is, well, I guess everybody's is, but my work is very much in that deep core director-writer relationship, that it's that creative collaboration that I love the most. And I knew early on I didn't want to be a writer-director, I wanted to be a director. And so you can't do that without a brilliant writer. You need the two of you to work together. And so that was something that I think New York gave me, that kind of a bit more bravery, perhaps.
Yeah. And so I guess after years of doing that, I mean, you sort of found yourself with clearly a very average writer in Peter Morgan. So you must be horribly disappointed at where your career's gone. Something you mentioned to me was that Peter, who writes The Crown, I'm sure everyone here knows that, or is one of the writers, the key writer, the
It's his show.
Play. It's a show.
Yeah.
You said his writing is scarily grown up, which I love.
Yes. I would. How would I best describe it? It is extremely economical. So, from what you see on screen, often you're getting maybe a 41, 43 page script, which is going to turn into well over 50 minutes of very dense drama. So you have what I would call, you have huge, big tentpole markers of scenes that are happening, and extraordinarily both simple and complex dramatic structure. So he is very, I think his real gift is he takes an emotional, very detailed, almost kind of minor key thought, but puts it in a major key plane. And that's where you as a director, so what he wants you to do then is, we often joke about filling in the connective tissue. So he'll literally sometimes write, Jess will do something here. I mean, he won't, but he'll write, montage, these beats will happen, but you decide what happens. And so you get given this amazing freedom to work dramatically in terms of, I know he wants us to leave the character at this point, and I know he wants the thinking process internally to get to that point. What can I do visually to take us through those steps? And I do that in conjunction, talk to him about it. There was one stage on the first season I worked with him where he'd put in a montage that I slightly misread, and I thought it was about the notion of falling in love. It was between Margaret and Roddy and the kind of headiness of that. And he said, oh, no, it's not about falling in love at all. He said, it's about the absence of the other, which when I went back to the text, you could just kind of feel like it was there. It wasn't anywhere in the words, but I understood that he was, by not putting Tony in there, he was talking about the absence of the other. And that led to me having an idea. We were in Spain and saying to the first AD, I know that the actor playing Tony Armstrong-Jones is here. Do you think we could have him on set tomorrow? I just want to do this moment with him where she's dancing and playing around, but she sees him briefly. And I said, and it may be awful. It may be an awful thing to do. And he went, no, it's great. Let's try it. And he said, if it doesn't work, you never have to show him. And I thought, oh, I love this. I love this first AD. And so we did it. And I kept it kind of secretly there, and my editor really loved it. And then we were having a screening certain bits of it, and some stuff wasn't working. And I said, look, can I just show you something? And I showed it to him, and he went, that's it. Great. That's what I was looking for. I was like, okay. So I guess they are extraordinarily crafted scripts, but there is a lot of space for you as a director to find ways to visually portray what the writer is reaching for. And that's the kind of magic combination I'm always looking for as a director. So that's
has that always been the norm for you? Is that I mean, clearly you now would seek that out. Have you found that, because we're talking about one of the biggest shows in the world, with a creator who clearly you guys can do what you want now, which is awesome. I presume you can. Creatively, I mean, that sort of creative freedom. Have you had that sort of experience? When was the first time you had that sort of experience where you felt a freedom and a collaboration with the writer on a show?
It would have been on Love My Way with Jacqueline Persky and Claudia Carvin. And I remember, I think we were all quite young. I think we were in our early 30s. And so we made the show we wanted to make, and we were making it. It was Foxtel's first drama. So it was tiny budget and kind of over here, and no one was watching us. So we were just very free to go, do you like that? Do you like that? It was really just the three of us kind of working together, and a really wonderful team of writers. But Jack was the linchpin in terms of the tone of what that show was. And it was really, we talked a lot about how we wanted to feel, what we were trying to evoke, why we were telling the story. She and Claude really wanted to explore this idea of what happens to a family when the center is taken out of it. So you're all these families where we have extended families, we break up, we reform, but we stay together because of children. And if that centerpiece went missing, what could possibly maintain in the structure? as soon as they described that to me, firstly, I cried. And also, I just thought, okay, this is wonderful. Now I understand thematically. And to me, that's what I'm always looking for. I'm looking for what thematically are we reaching for? What's the gift for the audience to watch this piece? You know, what someone alone in their living room, what will hopefully be their takeaway experience. And that's what I love about television and film, is that you can hopefully reach through and give something to someone, you know, something that takes them out of themselves or reflects something back at themselves.
Well, certainly the joy of watching The Crown, you really feel the thematic pull for episodes, and I certainly appreciate that the theme is often like an onion. It kind of reveals itself as the thing goes on, and sometimes waits till the very last scene, and then you get that just delicious moment as an audience of going, I know what it's about. And it's drama for smart people.
Yeah. That's a lovely way of putting it.
Which is everyone, actually, but it's assuming the audience is emotionally smart. Yeah.
Well, I think it's a wonderful drama about, you know, a dysfunctional, you know, a family that's challenged, but it's also about duty and sacrifice on a global level, and what it is to live your life in a permanently public eye. And that, you know, I did not start the show, and nor would I probably say as a monarchist, but I have extraordinary respect for the Queen in particular, in the life that she has chosen to live, and it's such a great privilege to have access to that. I mean, on a show like this, we have a team of, I think there's about 10 researchers, but someone does visual archive, someone else does visual imagery, someone else does all the books and sends you the quotes. And so you can ring up and say, I want the situation with Margaret. You know, I need her in a situation like this. I need her to be shamed. Is there something, was her birthday around this time? Was there something with her family? And then I can kind of feed that back and that detail back into Peter and say, could we just tweak the scene so this is the setting? And if it stays on theme, he's like, great, yep, no problem. So he's very generous like that. He's very collaborative.
So you're working as a director routinely with the writer he's not, or any writer is not just handing you over a script, is what I'm hearing, and then you're doing that script. It's a lot of back and forth.
There's a lot of back and forth, and a lot of, you know, I've worked very hard over the years to get involved very early in development. So sometimes ideas come in, it's through a book or it's through something. And, you know, I've worked with Peter now, this is my 3rd season. So we talk most days. He'll ring up and say, I'm thinking about, can I just kind of basically sounding board you? And it's with anything creative, it's just letting someone talk it out and then reflecting back to them what you're getting from them, what you think they're saying. And also sometimes in the process of doing that creatively, you discover what it is you need to say. I think I was telling you yesterday that I have a thing in the edit room when we're really getting stuck and going, we're getting myopic, and it's like, we're not reaching this, I'm not getting this feeling that I got when I got from the script. What is not working? It's clunky, or it's that we kind of have, it's, you know, it's the 5 post-it rule. Sometimes it goes to 7, but it's like, what are the 5 key emotional beats that we have to hit in story? Essentially, someone's going to watch this, they're going to ring a friend and go, you got to see this. It's about a guy who blah, 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 you know, the kind of 3 beats. And sometimes when we really force ourselves to narrow it back to that, you put that up in the edit room and you're like, okay, every cut we make has to speak to that. We're trying to jump those bridges, and how do we connect those emotional things? I was talking to you yesterday, I think, about the Prince Philip and the astronaut story, you know, and that was one of the ones that scared me. I just thought, okay, great. It's 1969. Everybody knows that the moon landing worked. Like, how do I pull off the tension of that on tiny black and white television screens? And also on a much bigger meta level, this is a story essentially about a man who is having a crisis of faith, but it's told through his desire for adventure. And he's not going on any adventures. He's just in a palace the whole time. So what can we do to kind of draw that out? And and that's when we started thinking about actually traveling with him in his mind, his perception of where they were going, and then talking to the visual archivist and saying, she said, it's all right, I've got NASA, it's great. Then all this footage arrives from NASA.
I've got NASA.
Yeah, I know. I was like, okay, it was my first time on the job. I'm like, okay, I love this job. This is just, it was brilliant. And the same thing kind of, I really loved I was really looking for kind of contemporary music of the time and wanting to use, I really love using songs sometimes in work. I just think that they can be really evocative and beautiful if they're specific to it. And Peter really embraced that, which was great. So, we do more and more of that now, which is nice.
Well, I'm going to just sort of transfer over from writing. We're going to gradually work backwards, is the thought here, to from working with the writer to I suppose putting. Well, I was about to say putting the director's hat on, but you've always got the director's hat on because you are a director. One of the things that you said yesterday to me that, I mean, we all know, but it was so great to hear it said by someone who's working constantly at this level. You're not shooting the script, it's going to another form.
Yeah, absolutely. Your job as a director is to take that script and transcend it onto the screen, to take all of that magic that's happening in the writer's head and give that sensation to the audience, as it were. So I don't, so much of what it is the conversation with the writer about what's happening between the lines, underneath the text, what's going on, what their intent is, and not assuming that. So that's a big part of it as a director, I think. And it's thinking very deeply about how you can evoke a sensation. I don't know, it might be I was talking with someone the other day about the beauty of Nomadland, because it's not a film about loneliness, it's a film about the joy of being alone, and that is such an extraordinary achievement, I think. And so you're always thinking in terms of the mise en scène, what atmospherically can I create that will give us that sensation, that feeling? And you're working with the actors to go, okay, what do you feel just before you enter the room with these people? So I'm always looking at the spaces in between, as it were. So you've got the scene itself, what happens just before it, what might happen just after it, how might they prepare for that meeting that they're going into? And I don't need all of that in the script. I'll find those ways through it, but I do make sure that I'm constantly in dialogue with the writer about what I'm thinking of doing. Someone like Peter loves to be surprised, and it's great to just keep some things back and not tell him and then show him. And you just have to kind of judge with the writer how that is. And, I love working with them on set if they want to be. A lot of writers don't want to be on set, and that's completely fine. But then in the cutting room, that's a whole nother relationship that you're developing and talking between each other. And I just think keeping that thread is really sacred to me.
There's a lot of, strikes me that there's a lot of agency that you're talking about here, that you as a filmmaker have consciously, and stop me if I'm putting words into your mouth, but have constantly taken, or at least in now that you're, as you've developed, taken agency over. You haven't just gone, oh, my role is just to direct. I'm the writers have delivered the scripts, and the producers are expecting those scripts to be translated, to be filmed. That's it's a very creative way of thinking, right? And I suspect that there's a few people kind of watching this, and maybe you can think of your former self once upon a time, maybe, who go, okay, well that's amazing and that's great if you're directing, The Crown, and you've got this great relationship with this amazing writer, and you've established yourself as a fabulous person. But who know that sometimes the reality, especially back here, is that you are, on smaller things, you're handed something to shoot, and there's I suppose there's more prosaic expectations.
Yeah, I think it's not just there. I think everywhere, the world of television developed from a kind of producerial perspective. And I have worked very hard to make it directorial, or that the director can work with the producer, with the writer, that they're equal voices in what's happening there. I do understand, I certainly can remember a lack of agency or a lack of sense of agency, but I think there are ways that you can work on that in terms of the way you communicate, gaining people's trust, creatively getting in there and talking, having the very difficult discussions up front, I think, which are, can we all talk about what we hope to make here? And getting someone else to tell you the story back to you reveals so much of the way they see the piece. And I do that in those early the first meeting. I'm going to tell you the way I see it, and then you tell me the way you see it, and let's see if there's a kind of bridge between us, if there's a road we can walk together. Because if you don't, that is something I learned along the way. If you don't have that hard discussion up front, you could end up on a set with someone going, what are you doing? This is insane. This is not the way I imagined it at all. But you also have to build, you need to be trusted as a director. I think you need a certain amount of freedom. Certainly when you're on set, you need to be running it. You need to be, because the actors need to have one person that they're going towards. They need to kind of understand who that is, that's their audience for that period of time and where their direction is coming from. But
I think that's I think that's the norm for, most directors would go, well, on set here, they basically leave us alone. But there's the process before you get to set is, can be a lot, can be for some a lot more, sometimes a lot more controlled. It strikes me that that's about making everyone feel like they're contributing to the thing, rather than there being some sort of competition or the director's trying to take over from what the writer has written.
Exactly. You're making it together, you're making it together. I don't want the writer to come on set and everyone to go, oh, the writer's here. It should be like, oh my God, fantastic. Come and look at what we're doing. This is great. And here's a monitor and da-da-da-da. And let's, that's, I've learned to do that, I would say. But also I have a very strong belief that people are on a film set in every position because they love the medium. They got into it because they loved it. It's a hard industry. It's a freelance industry. Most people don't know when their next job is coming from, therefore where their next meal is coming from. And so I look for everybody and I think, one of the things I do a lot is tell everybody what the scene's about and talk about it and say, look, it's about these two people and this is the moment where this is about to happen. And so if we can just think about that, everybody will engage in that. The gaffer will do something with the lighting. Someone will be sensitive in the way that they're controlling the camera, or, you want to engage people. And I was out on a recce the other day and we were looking for a whole lot of stuff to do with horses. We've got huge sequences coming up. And, everything worked except the water moment, what we call the water moment. And they were like, but that's kind of fine. I said, yes, except if you're in my head, the water moment is the moment. In that 8-page scene, that's the moment. And they all went, ah. And I said, so what we need to do is find the water and then everything else I can make work. And they were like, good to know. So I think that's, that's part of your role is you can't assume that everybody reads something differently. Everybody sees something differently. And that's the hardest thing as a director is people say, how do you see it? And I'm like, it took me a long time to have the courage to say, I can tell you how I feel it. I feel it like this. And then the images come as a result of the feeling. I don't start with those. And so that is the way I work. I think everyone's got to be very honest with themselves about where their strengths are and where their storytelling comes from.
Did it take you a long time to figure that out? Or did you know that very early on?
I think I intrinsically worked from that instinctive perspective, but it took me a long time to understand that was a strength, not a weakness, because it's such a, it's in many ways it can be a brutally technical industry, and so there was so many things to learn about what's going on. But actually, a lot of that, there are so many people who are, most of your crew will have made far more productions than you'll ever direct in a lifetime. So they can contribute enormously to that technical. They just need some kind of guidance. And a lot of people, I found that if you do talk emotionally, they respond completely to a feeling, and then they start contributing palette and form and tone into that. So, I would say tone and emotion are the two things that I think about the most, and that's where I build the visual world from.
Mm. And just, I guess, tangibly, what sort of process do you go through to build that world for yourself? I mean, clearly you spent a bunch of time reading that script and understanding it deeply as a starting point.
Yeah, I have a couple of, really kind of slightly sacrosanct processes. My first read of a script is with the door shut, with no interruptions, with the phone off, and no notes. I never take any notes when I first read a script. I just read it because I want to sense it. I want to have a feel of it. I want it to wash over me. And I still don't take any notes after I've finished it. I get up and I'll do something, I don't know, go for a walk, something domestically. And then when it's filtered down, I start making notes. What I need is the big picture in my head. I want to see, when I read a script, I see it immediately. So I want to see that film or see that piece and think about how it makes me feel and what's moving me, what isn't, where the bits might be missing, what it is, that I'm going through. So that's probably the first thing. And then I do start kind of thinking, I start looking around for images or places or things that kind of evoke a feeling. And there's not a lot, maybe half a dozen. There's something that's just atmospheric or a person caught in a moment that I can then use as a kind of touchstone as I go through.
You're talking about still images or paintings, or what sort of
anything really? Yeah. Sometimes it's describing, I don't know, you see someone at a bus stop and you're caught by something. So it's those kind of things. And then I think, I then start drilling down and doing a lot of analytical work in terms of what's going on for the characters individually. So the characters are having an individual journey and the story is having a kind of meta journey. And so I'm really trying to make sure that I can, that I've got the note of what the big themes are. And so when I go and talk to the writer, I'm like, essentially, I think we're trying to say this about this person or this about this event. For me, it's so much, it's good to know what's happening, but that's not where I direct from. It's why it's happening. And I'm not great with stuff which is very what's happening based. There's some stuff which is brilliant and it's written really well, it's really clever, but I'm only going to unravel that. So I'm not the right person to do that kind of thing. And then the next big work for me is casting and working with the actors, which I do very much on an individual basis initially, having time with them. And again, it's getting them to tell me the story that they believe that they're telling. And that is so, it just gives you such a revelation as to the way they're seeing their story in the script. And that's when you start to go, yes, or shifting, as to what it might be. Tobias, when we were working on the astronaut story, really, really, really struggled with the script in its initial form. He found it very, he was struggling to trust that we could get there. And we were going back and forth. And eventually I said, it's not fundamentally going to change. And I don't think it should. I think this is really great. And he was brilliant at that point. He went, don't worry, this is my process. This is what I do. I just chip. And I was like, okay, great. And I said, because it's you doing it, not me. I can't make you do anything. And you're the one up there. So if you can trust me and I can trust you, then we can. And so that's when we started. I was like, okay, what are the things that are really disturbing you? And he'd say, it's the way I talk about the astronauts after I've seen them. I'm like, okay, so maybe that's something to go towards. Why are you so uncomfortable? And then it was like a little unlocking for him about the type of behavior, which is to do with shame and vulnerability. And often that's what you're reacting to, things that make you very uncomfortable. I can't remember where we started that question. I'm so sorry, Rob. I went from you were talking
just as an aside yesterday about that same show and about that same episode. I mean, and you mentioned that you had a great idea to build a huge set, a zero gravity set. Could you tell that story? Because there's something in there around the freedom to experiment when you've got maybe that sort of budget, or I don't know, all those sort of people. It doesn't even sound like it's about budget.
Yes, I asked if we could build the interior of the Columbia Shuttle, and they said yes, which was brilliant, because I wanted to have a moment with Michael Collins, because I'd done a deep rabbit hole of his experience, because he was the only person who didn't see it. Well, not the only person in the kind of Western world, those people who had access to televisions, but in a sense, he was never going to have that experience at the other two. And I got very, it made me feel how I felt he related to Philip in that way, because Philip is always the handbag in the situation. He's always the person next door, and that's what he was struggling with. And so we built the set, and we actually used the camera, a kind of rotating camera rig, which enabled him to float. We had a brilliant moment on it, because I was like, I was running it all at 50 frames, and I was like, why is it so slow? And I realized that the actor, I went in and said to him, are you slowing it down? He said, yeah, because you said you wanted it slow-mo. I said, no, I'm doing that with the camera. He was so brilliant. He went bright red. I went, it's complete. I love that you did that. I completely love that you did that. However,
we've got technology here.
But when I showed it to Peter, he said, I feel it's taking us too far outside. And I was like, okay, you're right. But that's a privilege to work on a show, to be able to do that. And I was terrified that someone would come back and say, what were you thinking? But they were like, no, you tried it. It's okay. And 99% of everything that I did ended up on screen. It was the one thing. But I do remember thinking how wonderful it is that they would allow me to explore an idea to that end.
Well, it encapsulates this idea of having freedom to fail. Because if you don't have freedom to fail, which is actually within you rather than having to spend heaps of money to fail, does that resonates? That freedom to
clearly
fail? Yeah. Okay.
I mean, one of my favorite things is to watch shows that I think are brilliant ideas, even if they don't quite make it, because they'll lead to something else that therefore will make it. And I'm much more interested in that reaching out and trying something that might not work than playing it safe, as it were, or doing something that we know works from the past. I find that the kind of exhausting reference to, it's like this crossed with this. I'm like, I hope it's like nothing we have seen before. That's, that kind of referential stuff gets, I'm not great at that in meetings, let me just say that. But
well,
I do think it's
sales
really
talk rather than creative talk, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, I know what I think it is people trying to get a concrete sense of what it is they're seeing. And so you have to think about how to help them do that without necessarily basing it on lots of other things. And there are different ways you can do that. But I think the notion of reaching for something, I'll often say, I don't know if this is going to work. This is what I want to reach for. This is why I'm reaching for it. But there's no guarantees ever. And I find that a great freedom and creativity. And I'll say to an actor, well, why don't we try it? It doesn't, all we can do is, it doesn't work, give it a go, see what it is. I much prefer that kind of a willingness to experiment and step out. I find if things are too planned, I always like a little bit of anarchy on my sets, a little bit of chaos. We had a little moment on The Crown with the brilliant guy playing Roddy, and we were doing some stuff in the pool that wasn't scripted, but I really wanted to. I'd found this pool and thought, oh, great. And I knew Helena was up for it, and he was great. And we had an underwater cameraman, and we had another camera up on the surface. And I just said, I don't want to rehearse this. Can I just let them go and play some music? And they were like, yeah, okay, and we needed to do it quickly. So everyone was very happy about that. So we started rolling, and Harry brilliantly went and opened the bottle of champagne and drank it. And it was champagne. And I'm getting this tap, 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 tap on my shoulder, which I'm trying to ignore, going, I'm like, yeah, I know, but it's so fantastic. Can we just leave it for a minute? I'm not saying be unsafe. It was just, and it was brilliant because he kind of got a shock, but then continued, and it was fun. So I do think sometimes there's a lovely opportunity to just embrace the chaos of of time constraints and go, okay, let's see what we can do here. Let's just go, And what you have to understand though is that generally you've done a huge amount of work, months and months of work to allow that chaos to happen, because you've cast the right people, you understand the story you're telling, you've worked on costume, you've worked on the setting, you've worked on the lighting, you understand what it is, and then it's just allowing it to be alive in that moment, because that's what's so precious to the actors, is to be in that moment, to not have a preconceived idea of how something is going to be played.
How do you create the let's just call it the safety net on your sets to allow and inspire your actors to bear themselves, to emotionally bear themselves, I mean, which of course is what we all want, and clearly what you achieve, even with actors of very high caliber, like incredibly high caliber, which actually means they've got further to fall.
I find that generally those actors are high caliber because they're always happy to take that risk. They are people who regularly cliff jump in the most spectacular ways, and that's what why we adore about working with them. But also it's trust. I spend a lot of time with them. I spend time with them talking about text, but I also spend time with them talking about life, and I'll often ask, what have been good situations for you on set? What have been situations that have really upset you on set and that you'd like never to happen again? And so from that, you start building a trust, and you also understand their kind of trigger points. Is it for some people, they kind of don't even want to know when action's been called. They like to just be in the midst of it and keep going. And other people really like a very calm, focused thing. And the challenge sometimes is you'll have two actors at either end of the scale in one scene. So you need to go, okay, I can have a little bit of wildness for this person, but I also need this person needs a bit of a safety net and quiet. So let's keep them in another room and they can just come in once we're rolling and take, so they've had their respectful space. And it's really your job is to find what works best for them and what draws them out the most, which is not necessarily the safest thing, as it were. The safety comes from trust and respect, not manipulating people, not putting people in emotionally unsafe situations. I know we talk a lot about levels of intimacy now, which is great in terms of sex scenes, but I also think there's an enormous care needs to be given to the emotional states that we're asking actors to go to, to respect that, to give them space and time afterwards to check that they're okay. Sometimes they just want to keep going, and a lot of that is the DPs and the people that I work with know that I like to roll and keep rolling. It's just, I might even go in and have a conversation, but they don't, because you don't necessarily want to break the thread of what's going on. And the other thing is I'm pretty self-protective around the monitor. I don't like people behind me. I like my space to watch because I'm connecting with them. And as soon as cut's called, I'm going to talk to them, and then I'll remember all the other stuff, because that's the stuff to me that's really precious. What I need to talk to the actor about, all the technical stuff I remember and I can come back to, but that stuff it's ephemeral. It's a sensation that you've got and you want to convey it.
Yeah, I'm pleased to hear that, because I often find the same thing myself around a monitor. I'll find myself influenced. So I'm the same at a much smaller level, but I'm the same. But I find myself if there's a producer standing directly behind me, especially if the time is ticking, I literally can't really see the scene because I can't feel the scene. Which sounds so it's a relief. I'm not just sort of paranoid and overprotective.
No, and often they're not. But everyone's watching for different things. There's a absolutely brilliant Brazilian DP that works on the crowd, Adriano Goldman, who I love, but I'd never been next to him at a monitor, and he's very expressive. So he's like, oh, and you're like, what is happening? The first time I worked with him, I went, Kat, are you all right? And he said, it's beautiful. I'm like, okay. Now I know that that's what you're doing. That's fine. But I didn't have any warning that that's how you were going to be during a take. So, and equally, you know, producers aren't, they're watching for all sorts of things. You know, they're watching genuinely, mostly they're wanting to be engaged because they've worked so hard to get everything to the point for all of this to happen in front of the camera. So, you know, but sometimes I'll just say, stand alongside me. If you're behind me, I find that hard. Or can I set you up with another monitor and then do come and talk to me? It's not that I don't want you to talk to me. It's just, I just can't, I get like white noise in my head. Otherwise I forget.
I guess one day we'll all just have VR headsets, won't we? And we'll just be.
I hope not. I think, yeah, I like, you would miss other things going on outside the frame sometimes, and there are. Yeah.
I'd like to just segue to talk about. Well, I just noticed that we're different genders, which is, I think, very, very, very interesting.
You just noticed, Rob.
I just noticed, and well. And but the thing that I really noticed when I looked back at your very early history back in New Zealand and your short film days and before that, I noted that you were a second AD on Jane Campion's Angel at My Table, and also Gayleen Preston's, or probably Dame. I should put Dame before these amazing people's names. Dame Gayleen's Ruby and Rata. And I guess my first question around gender is, to what extent were these, you know, hugely inspiring figures from the I think we're talking the 80s, aren't we? Late 80s, early 90s. A part of your, an inspiration for you, but more than that, a creative anchor.
They were, they were extraordinary, both of them. And Alison McLean was around that time. Bridget Eichen, who was just phenomenal creative producer. I feel like I came, you know, Nikki Caro was a friend of mine, and our contemporaries. There were a lot of women working in the film industry at high creative positions, and so I never thought you couldn't do it. I think I hit those bumps a bit later. The kind of certainly I felt it more when I went to Australia, and in television it felt slower, and film it felt that those voices were there. Less so in TV, but you know, the kind of I worked with Jane. I think I was 22, and at that stage, at second ADs, you cast all the extras, and we did workshops with them, and she always wanted your creative opinion. She engaged you in what she was doing. She would talk to you about why she was shooting things. I ended up having to first for 3 days for her because the first got sick, which was terrifying but brilliant to watch that process. You know, she there was no managing it. She would come to it when she was ready, and that's what she was finding in the process. And that I think back to that often. You know, what is it that we're looking for? You know, sometimes I'll be on set now, and it's taken a long time to go, you know, this just isn't working. Can we just clear the set for 5 minutes? Just leave me with the actors. And they're great. And I've done that for years actually now, which is, and sometimes it's even just because I can see an actor is really struggling, and all the tension needs to be taken out of the room. Just everyone go and have a cup of tea for 5 minutes. Just don't think about the schedule, do that. And then you can move much faster from that point on. So, and I think I learned that kind of stuff definitely from Jane. It was great, but also I just never thought it wasn't possible, because these women were all kind of leading the way.
And the speed bumps?
Lots of speed bumps.
Well, what sort of things? And more importantly than what they were, because I think we probably know the generality of, male dominated. You were telling me the statistics of actually female directors in the UK, and it's still pretty shocking. You might want to
13% is not a high number.
10%. It's quite really shocking. So, but I guess I'm interested in, or I suspect other people might be interested in, I guess, how you triumphed over those speed bumps, or did you just take another road?
Well, I think I think well, firstly, I'd say it is shifting and changing, which I think is brilliant, and I'm seeing it dramatically here now. Like I think I can't think of a female director who's out of work, because there is so much work on. But it's also supporting those ones coming up, so that when they get the opportunity, they can be mentored, or someone's around them to help them make those big leaps that are going on. I think personally, it wasn't necessarily, I don't know whether it was a male female thing, but I certainly suffered crises of confidence, and possibly the worst one. I worked on a production with two great people that I'd worked with before, should have all been fantastic. These two people, the producer and the writer, had a completely different viewpoint about the show they were making. And as the director, I tried to straddle those two viewpoints and lost mine. And it's the single biggest lesson I've learned. And even though it was very painful and very difficult at the time, and I don't think I did great work as a result of it, because I was trying to serve different visions, and I wasn't really focused on what mine was. But that was a great thing to take away. And now, even when I'm rattled, I just think very quietly, just do what you think is right. Do what you think is best. That's the best that you can do, and present that. And if it doesn't work, that's okay, but just do the homework, do the work. And, you can take in other people's things, but don't do stuff for what you think other people want to see. That's just not helpful, I don't think. So I would say it was more that, and whether that was, I don't know. I don't have a lot of bluff and bluster. I'm very kind of thin-skinned, and you'll know how I'm feeling and what I'm thinking. And sometimes I'm amazed. I've watched some, male directors they got great front, and I just don't have great front. But that may not necessarily be a gender thing. It's just not something I was born with.
Yeah, I guess there seems to be a period. It's probably a long time ago where all directors was the big brash. A lot of points. It certainly is what I kind of grew up thinking, that I guess that's what a director is supposed to do, and it never felt like me either. And
No.
And it's lovely, isn't it, to see kind of a world where we do embrace different styles, different genders, different styles. It's
Yes.
we've gone past that time. We hope. Do you seek out sort of a good gender balance in your crew, or is that not so important to you?
Oh no, that's really important, as much as possible. Yeah, and as much as possible diversity, because that's for a long time, and certainly it became really apparent to me when I moved to the UK. This whole idea of kind of internships, this is for people who have money, who don't need to, whose families can look after them while they work for free. I just not up for that, and it's the same with attachments or shadowing people. I felt for a long, long time, female directors were kind of put in as attachments or shadows, and it's like, but that doesn't lead to work. So if it's not leading to work, then no, it's not, either give them a second unit or give them a block, or there's great shows here. The soaps are doing it now, where they'll put a baby director on with the senior director, and they'll work alongside. So if the senior director's doing, a block of 3 episodes, the baby director will do one of those 3, but they've always got the other person on set with them. That's a brilliant way of doing it. They get the credit, but they've also got the support, and the production can breathe, because they're not worried that all the wheels are going to fall off the bus, and they're expensive, those wheels, when they fall off.
Yeah, I think some of those sorts of initiatives are starting to happen here as well, which is great. I've got a reader question here. It's on the gender question, gender issues. What wisdom can you share for a female director walking onto set for the very first time?
Oh, I would say listen to your instinctive voice, be yourself, don't be afraid to ask for help. Just go on and say, this is how I see it, this is what I'd like to do, and you'll find your allies. There are always wonderful allies on set, and they can be really unexpected, but find the people who you can communicate with.
We're gradually working our way to the beginning. And so I'd just like to ask about you getting started. How did you actually get started as a director? You know, it was in New Zealand, which is good. And to frame that around, I guess, thinking back to your, those early days, advice for other people who might be watching who are getting started. You know, where as I said, I think there's a lot of sponges here.
It's directing. There's no straight path to directing. There's just no way. I mean, it is incredibly self-driven. So I always encourage people to get ready for the opportunity, is the way I describe it. So sometimes if I'm mentoring people, it's like, okay, go away and read the script. Tell me how you might think about it tonally, or the opening of it. Now let's watch that film together. If I know they haven't seen the film. And then you can see their eyes go, and I'm like, okay, so that's your job. That's what you're doing. So you can prep as a director in a lot of ways by doing your own homework, by analyzing work, by looking at things. I did a lot of, every year I do a different kind of performance or acting course, which was deeply uncomfortable. I'm not an actor, and I was unashamedly caught out by an acting teacher in New Zealand, actually, who said at one stage we were doing an improv in a car and I was sitting in the back seat having a marvelous time watching what the actors were doing. She said, you're just observing, out you come. And I was like, so I would encourage, if you do it, to engage, not to observe, but put yourself in the actor's shoes, figure out what that's doing. If you're anxious about how gear works, I don't know, go to Panavision or do a workshop. There's lots of stuff around that you can educate yourself on. And the other thing is, you have to be really tenacious. I got my first job in the film industry because I rang, I've forgotten Murray's last name now, who was producing, I think it was Never Say Die, the Jeff Murphy film. And I rang the office every day for 2 weeks to ask if I could be a trainee assistant director, because I'd found out about the Film Commission running a program. I was probably 20 or 21. And no, and then and then on one of the days I rang, they said, he said, if you can be at the office before I'm back there, I'll take a meeting with you. So I ran from our house in Mount Eden to wherever the production office was. 2 hours I waited in that production office, and then he finally arrived. But I got that job, which was just the first rung on the ladder. So I do think you need a lot of tenacity. You need to spend time thinking and, building up your box of the kind of storyteller or director that you are. So that's something you can do as well. And be brave enough to talk about it. Tell people what you want to do. That took me quite a long time, because I started as an assistant director, and I clearly always wanted to direct, but it was hard to find that thing. And you're in a place where you've got a film commission which gives grants, but nowadays you don't need. I mean, anyone can make a short film. There was an exercise we used to teach I used to teach in the master's program at Sydney, briefly at the film school, that I couldn't get into twice, which I always used to tell the students. So just having a place in film school doesn't mean you have a career after this. But one of the exercises we used to do was, and we'd always do this at the beginning with the master students, which is, you've got, go away and make a 3-minute film that tells us about who you are, but you can't be in it. We want it tomorrow. And it was extraordinary what people would do. So think about the kind of exercises that you can do. You have an iPhone, you can make stuff that you're developing your directorial brain all the time by doing those things.
I'm going to give you some quick fires just from some of the questions that are coming in. We'll see whether they're quick fires or not. Actually, I missed one before, so sorry. I'm just doing a little scroll here because I missed one.
Doing very well.
That was about. Here we go. Where is it? Was about episodic television.
Oh yeah.
Oh, perhaps that's a bit hopeless of me, isn't it? I'm sorry. Sorry, I'll go to another question, and then while you're answering it, I'll. What's the biggest difference you found between working in New Zealand and UK environments, if you can remember working in New Zealand?
Yeah. It was so long ago. I mean, the last thing I did in New Zealand, I think, was in 1994. So it really is a long, long time ago. And so I would say my career is in a different place. There is, I don't know where New Zealand's at. Australia had a very two-camera concertinaed system, much more like the US, 7 days to shoot an episode, an episodic drama. Here, it's like anywhere between, it's usually around 14, I think, maybe, I don't know, 14. And then, but on something like I'm on, it's like 21. But but they're single cameras generally, which I really love, the focus of the single camera, because I think while you can cross shoot and there are things you can do with 2 cameras, it really does bugger up your lighting, but also it shifts the focus. And my problem is you often end up with 2 kind of average shots, rather than you end up with 2 B shots rather than 1 A shot and a detail. So I think if you're going to be using 2, that's how to think about it.
This probably isn't a fast question, but I feel a responsibility to ask it. I'm keen to hear Jessica's thoughts on story structure for miniseries and serial structure across the series, as well as individual episodes as building blocks.
Yes.
That's
okay. I think
that's a big question, but
yeah. Well, I think the thing is, I always think that one of the best examples of this was Broadchurch, which is the first thing I came to the UK to do, and I got to know the writer through a television festival through other friends, and both huge admirers of each other's work, and he was wonderful. And he sent me Broadchurch. I couldn't do it the first time, and then I ended up doing the second season. But he wrote that because he'd been writing a ton and show running a ton of other television, but that were other people's work. And he sat down and thought, I've got one chance, well, not one chance, but I've got a chance to write something just for me. And I'm just going to do it so I can enjoy the thing of writing, whether anybody ever makes this or not. And he wrote towards the thing that scared him the most, which was the loss of his child. And so that became the overall thematic, and then it was the detective story of why this might have happened and how you could lead to it. So I would say that when you're structuring, the beauty of long form television, you look at something thematic like Mad Men, which takes 7 seasons for someone to come to terms with the childhood they had that they started with. So your overarching theme is something very, very big. And then your building blocks are the choices that you make of the stories that you're going to tell. So for example, I find with Peter's work on The Crown, what's so fascinating, he has the arc across the whole series of what's going on for The Crown, but then individually it's which stories he chooses to shine a light on that build together to make a whole episode, a whole thematic across the season, as it were. Does that make sense?
It makes complete sense, and you do make it sound so easy, and we all know it's not. Our time is pretty much up, and I feel like it's quite a good time because you've reincorporated. You've come all the way back to the beginning with that person's advice to lean into what scares you the most, which was actually where we started. So I feel, in the interests of rounded storytelling or something, we should close off. I mean, clearly, Jessica, we could just keep going. It's been incredibly rich and incredibly useful, and actually for me personally, just really inspiring. I think to see that the things that are made on this sort of scale that just feels so frankly inaccessible when you're just sort of making small New Zealand productions, are made by real people who have a real creative soul and a collaborative soul. They're not, we assume sometimes the big American things, they're just all made by, I don't know, people you might not want to hang out with. And it would be lovely.
Michael Bay shouting.
I very much enjoyed it last hour.
And can I just say, Robert, how beautiful it is to reconnect with you after so many, 30 odd years, but also that we're both still working in an industry that we started off as short filmmakers, and how fantastic that is, that you can have a long career as a director. I think it's great.
Yeah, well, we dig it out somehow, don't we?
We do it because we love it, and because you do it anyway, even if no one was around, you know.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Jessica. I know we all appreciate it, and I have loved it myself, and I'm sure. In fact, I think I'm seeing comments pinging through now, so I'm sure we'll send you a little selection. And we do hope that you come down here sometime for one of our Screen Symposium or something when you're allowed to, and because we'd love to all meet you in person. Much kudos.
Oh, thank you very much. I'd love to too. See you, Rob.
I've got to say, apparently I've got to say a quick shout out to the Film Commission, New Zealand Film Commission. Jessica's already mentioned them for funding the program, and thanks so much everyone for watching. I hope you found it great too. I found it so much fun.
Thanks, Rob. See you later. Bye.